All right, Fed Chair Jay Powell delivering his final Jackson Hole speech in less than 2 hours from now. The address is called Economic Outlook and Framework Review. Set to cover some broad conditions, long-term policy goals, and the Fed's independence. Investors are watching for his take on the labor market, inflation, and, of course, the potential rollback of the 2020 inflation target framework and anything he says about the hint of interest rate direction. Let's bring in former Kansas City Federal Reserve President, former FDIC Vice Chairman, and Mercatus Center Distinguished Senior Fellow Thomas Hoenig. And I'm so glad you're with me this morning, sir. What are you expecting to hear from this final speech from Powell?
Good morning, Cheryl. I would say the framework, it looks like the framework will be discussed. I don't know that for certain, but it seems to be everywhere. And I think that'll be the big item this morning. And I think it will be, rolling back some of this inflation averaging and the relationship between employment and inflation with a pretty clear view that inflation must be around at least their target, if not, around their target. I don't know if they'll do a range or not, but that's what the framework will, I think, will tend to focus on.
And I have a feeling, and this is what Nick Timros writes about this morning in the Journal, that basically the Fed unveiled this strategy 5 years ago because they were worried the economy, had outgrown itself. Now they're going to formally reset all of this. But he talks about, in particular, that 2% inflation target, which seems to be a big focus, I think, for investors, because that changes changes their future direction on rates.
Well, it probably does. You never know for sure, because the thing about the policy is, I know you have the framework, but the framework is like the rule. It's basically a general statement of direction or a guide. And what they end up doing is looking at the circumstances at the time. And for example, leaving rates lower than they might otherwise is usually called insurance policy. We want to make sure the economy is going to do well, so you delay the increase. And on the upside, sometimes when the inflation gets out of hand, they move quickly and too much. So it's really monetary policy, remember, is discretionary and depends on who the chairman is and who the members are. And this so-called framework is a guide which can be used pretty flexibly, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, I've seen some commentary this morning that basically that the 2020 framework itself is kind of the overall reason why Jerome Powell and company have been too late, as President Trump has said repeatedly about their decisions. The minutes did come out Wednesday, and it showed that most officials wanted to keep rates steady. But the inflation risk against labor market concerns, that dichotomy, the dissents emerged with some signaling support for a cut as soon as September. There was 2 dissents. So how are you looking at their policy right now? And what do you make of this whole conversation about the overall independence of the Federal Reserve in the face of these attacks that have been coming from the White House against the Federal Reserve and Powell?
Well, first of all, on their policy choices, they're in a tough spot. I mean, inflation is still around 3%. That's 50% higher than their goal, and that's an issue for them, and they've got to be aware of that. At the same time, they are aware that unemployment is a big deal. In fact, the topic of the conference this year is on labor and how it's changing. So that's going to play a role. But they're very much aware, the majority of the committee right now, about the concerns for inflation and the fact that it may be slow to come down. And that I think that's what's going to draw them into the debate in September as they move up to it. So that's number one. Number two, in terms of their independence, look, the pressure on the FOMC for lowering rates is very common. I mean, Johnson did it, President Johnson, President Nixon, others have, because you want the economy to do well, especially if you're the president, and so you push for that. Now, whether they will say, well, inflation is going to be greater, and therefore we have to stick to our guns, that'll be debated come September. Early September, and so we'll have to follow that. But I think they're in a tough spot, and we'll see how they decide. Because first of all, some of the tariffs will put increase on costs, and therefore will put upward pressure on some prices, which someone's going to have to absorb. On the other hand, they do know that other factors, the deficit is a big issue, so they got to weigh that into the situation. So I think it's not a a right or wrong. It's okay. How do we debate this? How do we get through this to get an answer that is long-term useful to the economy and to the people of America? So their challenges are great.
Well, you've got $9 trillion in debt that's rolling over in a year, and that with this year, and that is something that with these interest rates where they are, that is at a huge cost to the American taxpayer, and that is where President Trump has said that these rates need to be lowered. I do want to ask you about this before you go. The Justice Department opened this probe into Fed Governor Lisa Cook over mortgage fraud accusations that were brought by Federal Housing Director Bill Pulte, a top DOJ official urging Jay Powell to remove her from the board. President Trump also wants her to resign. Now, Pulte said he's investigating a third property of hers right now. He told Maria that on this program Wednesday. And he said the president has got ample cause to fire her. But Cook says she's not going to quit, says these claims are baseless, politically motivated. Thomas, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, I don't know because, they're doing the investigation now. But first of all, I would say she probably went through a pretty heavy vetting when she was nominated. Whether that got through everything, I can't tell you. But I think it's a matter of following it now and seeing where things turns out. And if she claims this is not correct, so she I guess deserves her day in court, so to speak. And we'll see how it plays out. But it's really part of the process. And I think it's it is. Unfortunate, but it is what we have, and we'll have to see how it plays.
Thomas Hoenig, thank you for being here. We're now just an hour and a half away from that speech from Jackson Hole. Thank you, sir.